Alright, today we are looking at area of triangles and parallelograms. So some of these formulas we already know. So we're going to throw in rectangles as well. The area of a rectangle is the base times the height. So I'm going to circle that as a reminder that I need to continue to remember it. The area of a parallelogram is also the base times the height. So the base times what would be perpendicular from the base up to one of the other, between the two bases, what would be perpendicular. Area for a triangle, 1/2 the base times the height. So those are the three we will use for today. The first questions ask us to find the area of these polygons. For the first question here, you could look at this two different ways. You could find the area for the right triangle, the one on the left, and then separately the one on the right, using 45 as your base for the one on the left, 45 times 28 divided by 2, or 21 times 28 divided by 2. Or you can do it all at once using the base as 45 plus 21 for the entire base times 28 divided by 2. So that would be 28 times 66 divided by 2, which would give us 924 units squared for the area. So now let's look at the parallelogram. The base, it shows me up here, is 17, and the height is 7. So my area would be base times height, 17 times 7, which is 900, excuse me, let me erase that, 119 units squared. So let's look at our next question. The base of a triangle is 4 times its height. The area of the triangle is equal to 50 square inches. Find the base and the height. So some kind of triangle, height, base. Things I know are that the area, which is the base times the height divided by 2, is 50 square inches. And I know that the base is 4 times the height. So the base is 4h. So I'm going to use substitution to plug in and solve. So I would have 50 equals, and instead of base, I'm going to write 4h times h over 2. So 50 equals 4h squared over 2. That's the same as 50 equals 2h squared. So if I divide both sides by 2, I would have 25 equals h squared. So h could be plus or minus 5, but if we're talking about the height of a triangle, only positive 5 would make sense. So the height is 5 inches, and the base would be 4 times that. So 4 times 5 would be 20 inches for the base. Now we're looking on the back, finding the area of this parallelogram. The base I can see is 25. I see the height, but I don't know what number it is. I know it's going to make a right angle, and I have one part of that right triangle that's made. It says is labeled as 5. I also know the hypotenuse of that right triangle is 13 because of the properties of parallelograms. So I can solve for h. 5 squared plus h squared would be 13 squared. So h would be the square root of 13 squared minus 5 squared. So h is the square root of 169 minus 25. So h is the square root of 144. So h is 12. Again, only the positive number making sense. That is also a Pythagorean triple. So if we remembered that, that would save us a little bit of time. So area for our parallelogram, base times height, 25 times 12, and that would be 300 units squared for that one. Now we get to do the same thing, area of another parallelogram underneath. This is the shaded parallelogram, so I can see the base is right here, 9, and I need the height, so I'm looking for what would make a right angle with the bottom. It's not in the shaded area, but it is in the picture. It's CF. That's the height. It would be the same as if I moved it over. It's the height from the top base to the bottom base, and it's perpendicular. So the height is 4. So then the area of the base would just be 9 times 4, which would be 36 units squared. All right, so let's look at one that has maybe a few more steps. A robot vacuum cleaner can clean 2 square meters of carpet in 8 minutes. About how long does it take for it to clean the carpet covering a room with the dimensions shown on the right? So this shape looks like it could be broken up into multiple rectangles to help. So I'm going to draw this line in. That way I would have a square on the bottom, and I could do 5 times 5 and get 25 meters squared for that area. Then, since this side is 9, I would be left with right here 4 meters. So I could do 4 times 9 and get 36 meters squared for the top. So the total amount of area would be 25 plus 36, which would be 61 meters squared. So I'm trying to figure out how long it's going to take this robot. So he does 2 meters squared in 8 minutes, and I'm wondering how long will it take him to do 61 meters squared. So I'm going to make a proportion. If 2 meters squared is 8 minutes, 61 meters squared is X amount of minutes. And I can solve this proportion. So we would cross multiply, so 2x equals 61 times 8, so that would be 2x equals 488, so x would be 244. So it would take this robot 244 minutes to clean that space. On the side, oh boy. All right, now I have another parallelogram. It says the height of the parallelogram is 10, so let me draw that in there. This is 10. And an obtuse angle of the parallelogram is 115. So that would be the one I just drew my height through, and this one is 115 degrees. Find the perimeter of the parallelogram. Okay, well, I'm halfway there because I know it's 16 and 16 for 2 of the sides, but I need this last side. And the only thing I know is that this angle over here is 115. But from my properties of parallelograms, I can remember that it is going to be supplementary to the other angle in the parallelogram. So that angle would be 65 degrees, which would match what's in my right triangle on the other side. So I could use my trig ratios to find x for this right triangle. So if this is my angle 65, then 10 is the opposite side. The adjacent side is the one with no label, and the hypotenuse is x. So I want to deal with the opposite and the hypotenuse, which means I'm going to use sine, because SOHCAHTOA, sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So I could write sine of 65 is the opposite, 10 over the hypotenuse, x, and solve for x. So to solve for x, I'd have to multiply by x on each side. So sine of 65 equals 10, and then divide by sine of 65 on both sides. So x would be 11.03 if we're rounding. So x is 11.03. It would also be the same on the opposite side of the parallelogram, since opposite sides are congruent. So the perimeter would be 16 times 2 and 11.03 times 2. So my final perimeter would be 56.06 units. Let's try our last one. Our last one says to find the area and the perimeter of a triangle with the given vertices. Since it gives the coordinates, I'm going to try to make a little graph of what that might look like. So 1, 2, I'll put right here for A. 1, 2. 3, 9, I'll put way up here for B. And 6, 6 can go here in the middle. And we are supposed to find the area and the perimeter. Well, I'm going to do the area first. So I'm going to draw in a rectangle that would go around all of these vertices. So the distance from 1 to 6 for the bottom of the rectangle would be 5. The distance from point A to point C on the side would go from 2 to 6, so that would be 4. The distance above from C to B goes from 6 to 9, so that's 3. The distance from B to C through the x-axis is 3. The distance from B to A on the x-axis is 2. That's good because 2 plus 3 is 5, which matches the bottom. And on the side from 2 to 9 for the y-coordinates, we get 7, which is also good because 3 plus 4 is 7. So I'm going to find the area of the red rectangle and subtract triangles 1, 2, and 3's area, and that way I would be left with the area of the blue triangle. So area would be the rectangle minus triangle 1 minus triangle 2 minus triangle 3, which would be 7 times 5 for the rectangle, minus for triangle 1 it would be 2 times 7 over 2, minus for triangle 2 it would be 3 times 3 over 2, minus for triangle 3 it would be 4 times 5 over 2. So that would be 35 minus 7 minus 4.5 minus 10. So the area would equal 13.5 units squared. Okay, so now the perimeter. So I need to find the distances of each side of the triangle. So the distance for AC would be the square root of 5 squared plus 4 squared. So that would be the square root of 25 plus 16, which is 41. For BC, that's one of our shortcuts. It's a right triangle with 3 and 3, so our distance is 3 root 2. And for AB, it would be the square root of 7 squared plus 2 squared, so that would be 49 plus 4, which is 53. So the perimeter would be the square root of 41 plus the square root of 53 plus 3 times the square root of 2, which we can leave it like that if we want to, or we can make it a decimal, which would be 17.93 units. And that would be all.